Move now. This seat isn't for you." The words cracked through the cabin like a whip, loud enough to silence the soft hum of the engines. Heads turned. Screens paused. A single order, flung like a verdict, and suddenly the plush first-class cabin felt less like a sanctuary and more like a courtroom. She stood over him, uniform pressed sharp, finger stabbing the air like an accusation. Her voice carried that confidence of someone certain no one would challenge her. The passengers nearby didn't breathe. They only watched. Marcus Grant sat still. Black suit, pale blue tie, a small leather case balanced on his knee. No entourage, no champagne flute, no display of wealth, just presence. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. His eyes lifted slowly, calm as stone, as if to ask, "Is this the best you've got?" The attendant leaned closer, her shadow spilling across his seat. "Sir, this is a VIP section. You don't belong here. I'll only say it once." The words dripped with disdain, as if each syllable scrubbed the air clean of him. Around them, whispers rippled like turbulence. A man 2 rows back murmured, "Did you hear that?" A woman clutching her handbag frowned, unsure if she'd just witnessed a mistake or a policy. Marcus breathed once, steady, measured. His silence was heavier than any protest, and in that silence, the scene deepened. The walls of the cabin seemed to lean closer. The leather seats no longer whispered luxury, they echoed suspicion. The people who minutes ago were strangers were now witnesses, unwilling jurors in a trial of appearance. The attendant jabbed again toward the aisle. "Move now, or I'll call security." Her words weren't instructions. They were declarations. Final, brutal, certain. Marcus's hand rested on his case, fingers still, jaw set. He looked at her the way one might look at a storm rolling in. Inevitable, but survivable. What she didn't know, what no one yet knew, was that the man she was humiliating owned more of this airline than her captain, her manager, and the couple sipping wine behind her combined. But that truth wasn't for this moment. Not yet. For now, he let the insult hang, let the disbelief grow, let the room bend under the weight of one assumption, that a black man in a tailored suit could not possibly belong in the seat he had purchased. And as the tension climbed higher, you could feel the shift something about to break. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. Because the storm was only beginning. Marcus Grant hadn't dressed to impress. That was the point. Dark gray suit, plain tie, no jewelry, no watch worth flaunting. Just a man with a briefcase, boarding a plane like everyone else. To anyone glancing his way, he could have been a mid-level manager flying for business, or a tired father heading home. He wanted it that way, because Marcus wasn't just a passenger. He was an owner, 30% of the very airline whose crew had just told him he didn't belong, and he was here today with purpose. For months, reports had trickled in quiet, ignored complaints. Black passengers moved from seats they'd paid for. Women told they were in the wrong cabin. Anyone dressed down, anyone who didn't look the part, pulled aside, humiliated, replaced. Marcus had read every word, and he had promised himself, "I will see it with my own eyes." So he boarded without his team. No assistant, no board member, no entourage. He booked the seat under his real name, no hidden upgrades, no calls ahead. He wanted to feel what others had felt, and now, minutes into the flight, he was living it. Around him, the first-class cabin gleamed. Polished wood, soft overhead lights, the hushed clink of wine glasses. It was supposed to feel safe, exclusive, elevated. But to Marcus, it felt like a test chamber, and the experiment had begun. He remembered another time, years earlier. 24 years old, just breaking into aviation investments, denied entry to a shareholder dinner because he looked like staff. He had smiled then, swallowed the insult, and stepped aside. That memory returned now, heavy and unshakable, as he sat in a seat he had paid for again, asked to prove he belonged. The attendant's words still echoed. "You don't belong here." They weren't new, they were familiar, too familiar, and every repetition carved the scar deeper. A few rows back, a young man lifted his phone, trying to look discreet. The red light blinked. A woman whispered to her husband, "Why are they bothering him? He's got a ticket." Their voices were soft, but Marcus caught them. Witnesses were forming. The room was shifting. He didn't look at the attendant. Not yet. Instead, his gaze drifted to the window. Clouds stretched endless, untouched, indifferent. That was the contrast. The sky knew no prejudice, but inside this cabin, bias had been given a uniform and authority. Marcus adjusted his tie, calm as stone. This was no accident. This was the moment he had come for. The trap wasn't his. It was theirs. And as the silence stretched, heavy and sharp, Marcus prepared himself. The escalation was coming. He could feel it in the air, charged and brittle. The next move wouldn't be his, it would be theirs. "Sir, let's not make this harder than it has to be." The attendant's tone shifted, no longer a sharp command, now a blade wrapped in politeness. She leaned in close, her perfume sharp, her voice low enough to carry weight, but loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "First class isn't a walk-in. These seats are for real clients, people who actually belong." The word belong landed like a stone. Marcus didn't answer. His stillness wasn't passive. It was deliberate, the kind of calm that unnerved people who thrived on control. From the galley, another voice chimed in. A younger male attendant with a smirk tucked in the corner of his mouth. "Yeah, man, economy's back there. You'll be more comfortable." He gestured vaguely toward the curtain as if brushing Marcus aside with one lazy flick. A few passengers exchanged looks. One woman frowned. A man muttered, "That's out of line." But the staff didn't notice. Or maybe they didn't care. Marcus's briefcase stayed balanced on his lap. His hands never moved. His eyes lifted slowly, meeting the young attendant's. Not anger, not defiance, just a stare steady enough to silence him mid-smirk. But silence rarely lasts in a room desperate for power. The cabin manager arrived, tall, blazer-pressed, voice pitched to authority. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, though his glance at Marcus suggested he had already chosen sides. The lead attendant snapped to attention. "This passenger is refusing to vacate a VIP seat. His ticket isn't valid. He's disrupting protocol." Protocol. The word snapped like a shield, a justification sharpened by repetition. The manager's eyes narrowed. "Sir, I'll give you one chance to avoid escalation. Move to economy, or security will be called." Gasps rustled through the cabin. Someone whispered, "Security? For sitting?" The hum of murmurs grew louder. Phones lifted, slyly angled, capturing fragments of injustice in real time. Marcus exhaled once, slow and deep. He remembered being 28, denied a hotel suite because the card looked fake. He remembered sleeping in a lobby chair while watching other guests stroll by unchallenged. The years had layered those memories into armor. He let the threat hang in the air. No flinch, no retreat. The attendant folded her arms, satisfied. "He's ignoring instructions," she said loudly, as if building a record for the invisible court she imagined was listening. The manager straightened, his posture hard. "Sir, last warning." Marcus finally moved, but only his gaze. He turned to the side, scanning the cabin, meeting the eyes of strangers now silently rooting for him. Witnesses, uninvited allies. The air shifted, charged, waiting. He looked back at the manager, unblinking. The escalation wasn't his to create. It was theirs to reveal. And they had just crossed the line. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Security, economy, fraud. The words circled him, heavy and sharp, but Marcus didn't bite. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He stayed still. The cabin felt that stillness. It wasn't submission, it was defiance wrapped in restraint. The kind of quiet that made people nervous because it refused to play by their script. The manager shifted, uncomfortable in the silence. He expected shouting, excuses, maybe begging. Not this. Not a man who sat anchored to his seat, breathing steady, eyes unwavering. The younger attendant laughed under his breath. "Guess he's got nothing to say." But the sound was thin, a nervous chuckle that cracked under the weight of Marcus's calm. A woman across the aisle whispered to her husband, "He's not even fighting back." Her husband replied, "That's what makes it worse. He doesn't have to." Marcus rested one hand on his briefcase, fingers light, not gripping, not guarding, just a gesture of ownership. He adjusted his tie once, then let his eyes drift to the window again. Outside, the sky stretched wide, endless, free. Inside, the cabin pulsed with judgment. The contrast was striking liberation on one side of glass, prejudice on the other. The attendant grew impatient. "Sir, I need a response." "Nothing." The manager stepped closer, voice tightening. "Do you hear me? You are not allowed in this seat." Marcus blinked slowly, deliberate. One breath in, one breath out. His silence was an answer all its own, and that silence unsettled them more than any words could. Because silence meant control. Silence meant he wasn't playing defense. Silence meant he was waiting for them to make the next mistake. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. A teenage boy leaned forward, eyes wide. A woman raised her phone higher, capturing the tension without words. The story was writing itself. The younger attendant scoffed again. "What's he proving by just sitting there?" The woman filming whispered back, "Everything." Ugh. Marcus's memory flickered 20 years old. Standing in a dealership lobby, told the car he wanted to test drive was already spoken for. He had smiled then too, silent, waiting for the salesman to realize the paperwork was in his own name. The same patience lived in him now, honed sharper with every insult over decades. He shifted once more in his seat, not retreating but settling deeper, as if saying, "I am not moving, not because I can't, but because I won't." The attendant huffed, turning toward the manager. "We'll have to call security. He's non-compliant." The manager nodded, reaching for the phone. Marcus exhaled again, steady, unshaken, the calm before the storm. And as the cabin held its breath, one truth became clear. The louder they pressed, the stronger his silence became. The first camera light blinked like a spark in the dark. A phone, tilted just enough to catch the scene, then another, and another. Silent witnesses were becoming recorders, pulling the moment into permanence. From row 3, a young woman whispered, "This doesn't look right." She angled her phone, lips pressed thin. Her companion frowned. "He showed a ticket. I saw it." 2 rows back, a teenager leaned into the aisle, eyes wide, whispering to his mother. "Why are they treating him like that?" The mother shook her head slowly, as if the answer was too heavy to speak. The murmur spread. It wasn't loud yet, but it was enough. Enough for the attendants to glance around nervously, realizing the audience had grown. The manager lowered his phone mid-dial, scanning the rows. His posture faltered. Authority thrived in silence, but silence was gone now, replaced by whispers, by lenses, by eyes refusing to look away. One passenger, a businessman in his 50s, tie loosened, laptop still open on the tray, cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said evenly. I watched him scan at the gate. Green light, valid boarding pass. The attendant froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She hadn't expected anyone to speak up, not for him. Another voice followed, firmer. A woman clutching her purse. "I don't know what you're seeing, but what I'm seeing is harassment." Phones lifted higher. Red lights glowed. Screens glinted off cabin walls. Marcus remained silent. Still, but his eyes shifted, acknowledging them. Not gratitude, not appeal, just recognition. He wasn't alone anymore. The young male attendant muttered, "They don't know the rules." But his voice cracked at the edges. The cabin manager snapped, "Passengers, stay seated. This is official protocol." But the words rang hollow, because everyone could see the truth. Nothing official justified tearing a man down for sitting where he belonged. A man in row 6 leaned toward the aisle, phone in hand. "You really want this on the internet? Because that's where it's going." The attendant's jaw tightened. She hissed through her teeth, "Sir, you'll put your device away or—" "No," the man interrupted, voice louder, clearer. "You'll explain why you're targeting him." The hum of passengers grew louder, voices weaving into a chorus of disbelief. It wasn't yet an uproar, but it was shifting. The weight of the room was no longer behind the staff. It was leaning toward Marcus. Through it all, Marcus didn't move, didn't speak. His silence became the center of gravity, pulling the entire cabin into orbit around him. The attendants exchanged glances, unease flickering in their eyes. They had wanted to isolate him. Instead, they had made him the focal point of an audience, and every story with an audience has consequences. The witnesses had chosen their side, and the storm had just found its echo. The murmurs hadn't died down when the cabin manager straightened his shoulders, trying to reclaim the authority slipping through his fingers. His voice sharpened, slicing through the low hum of passengers. "Enough," he barked. "Sir, you are not verified. This isn't economy, this is a premium cabin, and you don't qualify." The words dropped like lead. No corporate polish, no soft veneer, just raw dismissal. broadcast to the entire row. A gasp fluttered through the cabin. Someone whispered, "Did he just say that out loud?" Another passenger shook his head in disbelief. Marcus sat still, his hands folded lightly over his briefcase, gaze steady, unblinking. He didn't answer. His silence pressed heavier now, amplifying the ugliness of the manager's words. The lead attendant, emboldened, folded her arms and sneered. "People like you try this all the time. Fake tickets, fake cards, fake names. You think we can't tell?" Her tone wasn't procedural, it was personal. It wasn't policy, it was prejudice. From the middle rows, a woman spoke up, trembling but clear. "I saw his boarding pass. It was valid. Stop lying." The young male attendant rolled his eyes. "Ma'am, you don't understand. Fraud happens every day. He doesn't belong here." The cabin shifted again, unease spreading like fire. Phones lifted higher. The lenses no longer hid in the shadows, they gleamed openly, daring the crew to continue. Still, Marcus remained immovable, calm, silent, and that silence drew out their cruelty. The manager leaned forward, voice louder, every syllable dripping contempt. "Sir, you're wasting everyone's time. Get up before I have you escorted out like a trespasser." The word trespasser snapped through the air, heavier than security, heavier than protocol. A trespasser inside a seat he had paid for, inside an airline he partly owned. A man in row 4 slammed his tray shut. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "He bought that seat." Ugh. But the staff ignored him. Their focus was fixed on Marcus, the quiet center of the storm. The lead attendant stepped closer, voice now sharp enough to sting. "Do you hear me? You don't belong in this cabin. You never did." The line was crossed. Not suspicion, not caution, condemnation. Passengers shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, restless. The air itself felt charged, brittle, one wrong move away from shattering. Marcus breathed once, deep and steady. He had lived this before. He had carried these words before, but never in a space he literally owned. He didn't need to answer. He didn't need to rise, because every insult, every dismissal, every declaration was already being recorded in memory, in phones, in the quiet reckoning building around him. And soon, their words would turn against them. The escalation was complete. The storm was here. The cabin manager's patience snapped. He snatched the slip of paper from Marcus's tray, the boarding pass that had carried him through the gate, and held it high for everyone to see. "This isn't valid," he announced, voice sharp as steel. And with one sudden motion, he tore it straight down the middle. The sound of ripping paper cut through the cabin louder than the engines outside. Gasps erupted. A woman covered her mouth. A man muttered, "Oh, hell no." Phones tilted, capturing every second. The manager let the pieces fall, fluttering onto Marcus's lap like an insult delivered in fragments. "Now it's settled," he said coldly. "You're not staying here. Security will remove you." The lead attendant smirked, satisfied, as if the act itself had erased Marcus's right to exist in the cabin. She pointed toward the curtain. "Gather your things. Economy is waiting." Marcus didn't move. His hands stayed folded, his gaze steady. His silence weighed heavier now, pressing into every witness watching. From row 5, a passenger spoke up, voice trembling but strong. "You just destroyed his proof. That's not procedure. That's harassment." The young male attendant scoffed. "Stay out of this, sir. You don't know how fraud works." Another passenger shouted from the back, "Fraud! He was cleared at the gate. We all saw it." But the staff doubled down. The manager leaned closer, tone dripping with disdain. "Listen carefully. You don't belong here. You're holding up real clients." His words hung like poison in the air. Real clients. As if Marcus was counterfeit. As if presence alone couldn't be proof enough. The lead attendant grabbed the cabin phone, her voice sharp, clipped, rehearsed. "We have a non-compliant individual in first class. Possible fraudulent ticket. Request immediate security at the gate." Her call echoed through the cabin, amplified by silence. Passengers stirred, disbelief turning to outrage. A man muttered, "They're calling cops for sitting." Marcus exhaled once, slow, controlled. The kind of breath forged in boardrooms where millions hinged on patience. He had expected this. Maybe not the tearing of his ticket, but the attempt to erase him. A woman whispered to her daughter, "Why are they treating him like a criminal?" The girl whispered back, "Because they think he won't fight." The truth was sharper. He didn't need to fight. Not yet. The crew had gone too far. They hadn't just questioned him, they had tried to erase him. And erasure always leaves evidence. The torn paper on his lap, the phones raised high, the voices stirring in defiance. The escalation had reached its peak, and Marcus, calm as stone, sat in the eye of the storm. Because storms don't last, but owners do. The torn boarding pass lay across Marcus's lap like discarded evidence, two halves of a truth ripped apart, yet more visible than ever. He brushed the scraps aside gently, almost ceremoniously, then reached into his jacket pocket. Slow, calm, deliberate. A sleek black phone appeared in his hand. He tapped once. The screen lit, casting a glow across his face. The cabin seemed to lean closer, every eye fixed on the motion. "Rachel," he said softly, his voice low but carrying. On the other end, a woman's voice answered instantly, crisp and professional. "Yes, Mr. Grant." The manager stiffened. The attendants exchanged quick glances. The passengers leaned in. The name alone shifted the air. "Log this," Marcus continued, tone steady, unhurried. "Boarding pass torn by cabin staff. Passenger declared fraudulent without verification. Security being summoned without cause." Rachel's voice came back sharp as steel. "Already recording. Protocol engaged. The board has been alerted. Compliance is live." The words rippled through the cabin like an unseen wave. "Compliance is live." It sounded bigger than the room itself. The lead attendant scoffed nervously, folding her arms. "What is this, some kind of act? A phone call doesn't change anything." Marcus didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He kept his gaze forward, phone still in hand. Rachel's voice continued, louder now through the speaker. "Mr. Grant, do you want escalation to phase 2? The silence that followed was electric. Passengers shifted, phones recording, waiting. The attendants froze, their confidence thinning. The manager forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. "He's bluffing. Don't let him rattle you." But his voice wavered. Marcus finally spoke, lifting his eyes slowly to meet the manager's. "Phase 2, he said, calm as stone. Rachel's response came without hesitation. "Confirmed. Audit team is linked. All language used in this cabin is being transcribed live. Footage from passengers is syncing. Every action, every word, every protocol breach logged." Gasps flickered around the cabin. A man whispered, "Is this real?" A woman muttered, "Oh, it's real." The lead attendant's arms dropped slightly. Her smirk faltered. The young male attendant shifted his weight, suddenly restless. But Marcus didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He simply let the machinery of his power activate, quiet and relentless. Because justice doesn't need volume, it needs record. And record had begun. The cabin hummed with unease, the kind that comes before a storm finally breaks. Marcus lowered his phone, letting Rachel's words linger in the air. Every action, every word, logged. He rose slowly from his seat, not with anger, not with haste, with a quiet gravity that pulled every gaze toward him. Even the hum of the engines seemed to soften. Marcus adjusted his jacket, set his briefcase neatly on the armrest, and turned to face the cabin manager. His voice was calm, steady, deliberate. "You tore my ticket. You called me a fraud. You summoned security for the seat I purchased. Do you know why I haven't moved?" The manager opened his mouth, but no sound came. Marcus let the silence stretch, every second tightening the grip of his words. Then he spoke again, louder this time, carrying across the cabin. "Because this is not just my seat." His gaze swept the rows, catching the eyes of witnesses now holding their phones higher. "This is my airline." Gasps erupted like sparks catching fire. A woman clutched her chest. A man muttered, "Wait, what did he say?" Marcus's voice sharpened, each word a hammer. "My name is Marcus Grant. I am the CEO of Grant Holdings, and I own 30% of Horizon Airlines. This cabin, this plane, this company, you work for me." The silence that followed was seismic. The attendants froze, faces drained of color. The manager's jaw went slack. From the back, a passenger whispered, "Oh my God, he's the owner." Another added, "And they told him he didn't belong." Phones captured every flicker of disbelief. Marcus continued, his tone never rising, never wavering. "You thought you were humiliating a stranger. What you were doing was exposing yourselves. To me, to this cabin, to the world." The lead attendant staggered back a step. Her arms, once folded in smug defiance, now hung limp at her sides. The young male attendant looked down at his shoes. unable to meet Marcus's eyes. The manager tried to muster authority, but his voice cracked. You can't prove that." Rachel's voice returned instantly through the phone, clear as a bell. "Verification complete. Mr. Grant's shareholder profile is live on compliance screens. Ownership, 30%. CEO authority confirmed." The cabin erupted. Gasps, murmurs, applause breaking out from row 6, spreading down the aisle like a wave. Passengers leaned forward, recording, whispering, shaking their heads at the spectacle unraveling in front of them. Marcus stood still, letting the moment breathe. Then he delivered the line that cut sharper than any raised voice could. "You told me I don't belong in a seat on an airline I own. Tell me who doesn't belong now." The applause thundered. The witnesses had their proof, the staff had their reckoning, and the balance of power had shifted for good. The cabin erupted into chaos, not loud chaos, but the kind that unravels dignity thread by thread. The lead attendant stumbled back, her polished confidence cracking into fragments. Her lips parted, but no words came. She had built her authority on assumption, and assumption had just collapsed under its own weight. The young male attendant swallowed hard, sweat beading at his temple. His smirk had evaporated, replaced by a tremor in his jaw. He stared at the floor, as if hoping it would swallow him whole. And the manager, once towering, certain, commanding, stood rooted in place, his badge gleaming ironically under the cabin lights. His authority had turned to glass, fragile and splintering with every passing second. Passengers filled the silence with their voices. Applause broke first in the back row, then spread like a current. Some clapped slow and deliberate, others fast and furious. A woman shouted, "That's justice." A man added, "They tried to erase him now, look who's erased." Phones were raised high, lenses catching every falter of the staff, every cheer of the witnesses. Streams were already live, captions already forming. They told the CEO he didn't belong on his own airline. A teenager leaned into his mother's shoulder, whispering, "He didn't even shout." The mother smiled faintly. "That's real power." The manager tried to recover, lifting his hands as if to calm the room. "Passengers, please, this isn't official, we need to." But his words drowned under the applause. His authority no longer filled the cabin. Marcus's presence did. The lead attendant's face turned pale. She clutched the service phone like a lifeline, but her hands shook too hard to dial. She knew every word she had spat, every insult, was already logged, already live. The young male attendant muttered under his breath, "We didn't know. We couldn't have known." But even he didn't sound convinced. Marcus remained standing, unmoving, his gaze sweeping calmly across the room. He didn't bask in the applause. He didn't need to. He simply let the truth radiate from silence. A woman 2 rows down spoke firmly, voice cutting through. "You all heard it. You saw it. They treated him like a criminal. Now they're the ones exposed." A ripple of agreement swept the cabin. Passengers shifted in solidarity, bodies leaning subtly toward Marcus, away from the staff. The divide was no longer hidden. It was visible, physical. The attendants were no longer in control. The passengers were no longer neutral. And Marcus was no longer questioned. The hierarchy had flipped in full view. The cabin that once looked like a stage for his humiliation had transformed into a courtroom for their accountability. And the verdict was written in every phone, every cheer, every pale face standing accused. The applause still rippled through the cabin when Marcus lifted his phone again. Calm, steady, no need to raise his voice. "Rachel," he said evenly, "initiate termination protocol." Gasps spread faster than turbulence. The words alone carried finality. Rachel's reply came crisp through the speaker. "Names, please." Marcus's eyes settled on each one in turn. The lead attendant, still clutching the phone and shaking hands. The young male attendant, staring at the floor. The manager, trying to stand tall but shrinking with every second. Cabin manager Thomas Blake. Lead attendant Kelly Morris. Junior attendant Ryan Hale, Marcus recited, each name like a verdict. Rachel didn't hesitate. "Confirmed. Removing system access now." Beep, beep, beep. The sound came not from Marcus's phone, but from the staff's badges. Small red lights flashed where green once glowed. Their access had been revoked live, in front of every witness. The lead attendant gasped, pressing her badge against the service phone terminal. Nothing. The screen glowed red. Ascesis denied. The young male attendant tried his tablet. The device locked instantly, screen freezing with the same words, "User removed." The manager stepped back, voice breaking. You can't do this mid-flight." Rachel's voice cut sharp across him. "Mr. Grant has full executive override. Effective immediately, you are no longer employed by Horizon Airlines. Legal will contact you within 24 hours." The cabin erupted again, not gasps this time, but applause, loud and thunderous. Some passengers stood, clapping with both hands. Others cheered, voices ringing like justice carried on air. The staff staggered, pale, stripped of the very authority they had wielded minutes ago. Their power had evaporated in real time, replaced by humiliation of their own making. The manager tried once more, voice trembling. This can't be official." Marcus finally turned to him, gaze heavy, words cutting clean. "You called me a fraud in a cabin I own. You tore my ticket. You summoned security on lies. Consider this your final boarding call." The manager's mouth opened, then closed. No defense, no appeal, only silence. Marcus lowered his phone. The decision was final, irreversible, and every passenger knew it. The humiliation he had endured was now mirrored back on them, swift, public, undeniable. Justice didn't come in shouts. It came in silence, followed by consequences. And the consequences had landed. The cabin had gone quiet again, but not the quiet of intimidation. This was the silence of reckoning, the kind that lingers after truth has been spoken, after justice has been delivered. Marcus lowered his phone, slipped it calmly back into his jacket pocket, and picked up the torn halves of his boarding pass. He held them between his fingers for a moment, studying the ripped paper. Then, without anger, he set them neatly on the tray. "They thought tearing this made me smaller," he said, his voice low but clear enough to carry to every row. "But I don't need paper to prove my place." A hush spread across the passengers, leaning into his words. Marcus's gaze swept the cabin, steady and measured. Power doesn't shout, it corrects. And today, correction was necessary. The woman who had been filming lowered her phone just enough to whisper, "That's the line. That's the moment." The teenager beside her nodded fiercely. The dismissed attendants stood frozen, stripped not only of their badges but of their bravado. The manager's shoulders sagged, his eyes darting anywhere but Marcus. They looked smaller now, shrunken under the weight of their own actions. Meanwhile, passengers sat taller. Pride shimmered in the air. They weren't just witnesses, they were part of something bigger. They had seen prejudice collapse under truth. They had seen dignity stand unshaken. Marcus returned to his seat, set his briefcase gently at his side, and leaned back with the quiet ease of a man who had nothing left to prove. He didn't need to celebrate. The applause of the cabin was celebration enough. He didn't need to argue. Their silence was the argument's end. After a long pause, he spoke once more, a final line that landed like a verdict carved in stone. "I don't need a recording of this moment," Marcus said, "because I am the result of it." The words settled deep into the room, into the passengers, into the very fabric of the story now racing across every phone screen. Applause rose again, louder than before, echoing through the cabin. Some clapped with relief, others with admiration, but all with respect. The curtain to economy swayed slightly, as if even the air itself acknowledged the shift. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, resting not from exhaustion, but from completion. Justice had been served, dignity had been preserved, and a message had been carved into memory. Prejudice may try to erase, but truth will always outlast. The storm was over, and Marcus Grant remained,